The story of Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam. Do you remember those angels who visited Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam? Yes, they informed the Prophet that Sarah, even though she was old, would give birth to a son. The words of the angels soon came to be true. Sarah gave birth to a son. The Prophet named him Ishaq alayhi salam. The son of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam grew up, and he was one of God's messengers as well. Ishaq alayhi salam got married to Rebecca, and they soon had twins. Ishaq alayhi salam named them Esau and Yaqub. The elder son was Esau, and grew up to become a strong man. He was a good hunter too. But Yaqub was more intelligent, and he was his father's favorite. The brothers fought with each other a lot. Esau disliked the fact that his father favored Yaqub more than him. Esau became more and more jealous as they grew. As Ishaq alayhi salam grew old, he started losing his sight. The old prophet realized that he was going to die soon. He felt like eating meat for one last time. So he asked his eldest son to hunt some wild meat for him. Esau agreed and went hunting for the meat. Rebecca, his mother, had overheard this conversation. She ran to her younger son, who she favored, and told him, "Slaughter 2 goats of your best flock and cook them as soon as you know your father will like. Go and do this before your brother returns." Yaqub did as his mother had ordered. His mother then asked him to put on his brother's clothes to make him smell like Esau. Then she covered his hands and neck with goatskin. She asked him to do this as Esau was very hairy. She also asked him to speak like his brother. Then Yaqub stepped into his father's room. "Who are you?" asked Ishaq alayhi salam. "I am your son," replied Yaqub in a deep voice. His father then started eating the food. Once he finished his food, he felt satisfied. The old prophet then blessed Yaqub alayhi salam to be the better brother and to become the leader of his people. Once he got the blessings, he left the room. After some time, Esau walked in with the meat and entered his father's room. "What is this, my son?" The prophet asked when he heard Esau's footsteps. "I've brought you the meat you like." The old prophet was confused now. "Didn't you bring me the food some time ago?" he asked him. "I also gave you my blessings." "No, I did not," Esau said. It was then that he realized that his brother had cheated him. He felt so angry that he wanted to kill Yaqub right away. Rebecca saw that Esau was going to kill his brother. So she went to Yaqub and ordered him to go to her brother Laban in the land of Haran. She asked him to stay there until his brother was not angry at him anymore. Yaqub obeyed his mother and started his journey towards Haran. He walked by foot under the hot desert sun. One evening, he got very tired of walking and decided to get some rest. He took a stone and put it under his head and slept. That night, he saw an amazing dream. He dreamed of a staircase from heaven to earth. He saw angels coming down and going up the staircase. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Yaqub and this piece of land for his future generations. When he woke up, he realized that it was not just a dream. He had been really blessed by God. He took a vow that if he was ever to return to his family, he would build a mosque here for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He also vowed to give 1/10 of his property to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He placed the stone he used to sleep on in order to recognize this place when he came back later. He poured oil on it. This place is today known by the name of Jerusalem. Yaqub then walked toward Haran. He walked for many days, and he finally arrived in Haran. Yaqub alayhi salam then met his maternal uncle Laban and introduced himself. When his uncle realized that Yaqub was the son of his sister, he was very happy. He invited him to his house and introduced his daughters, Leah and Rachel. The Prophet didn't want to sit idle, so he started working hard for Laban. While he stayed at his uncle's house, he fell in love with his uncle's younger daughter. The Prophet told Laban about his love for Rachel. "Work for me for 7 years," he said, "and I will let you marry my daughter." The Prophet agreed. Yaqub alayhi salam worked hard for the next 7 years. Laban reaped the rewards because of the hard work of the Prophet. His wealth had increased manifolds by now. The 7 years were over, and as promised, Laban made arrangements for the wedding. He prepared a feast and gathered people for the wedding. But Laban cheated. Instead of Rachel, he got his elder daughter married to Yaqub. Yaqub didn't know about this, and he discovered the truth only in the morning. The Prophet realized that he had been cheated. "You deceived me," he said to Laban. "I was engaged to Rachel, and you married me to Leah?" "It was for a reason," said Laban. "It is not in our tradition to marry the younger daughter before the elder one. However," he added, "if you love Rachel, work for another 7 years, and I will let you marry her." Yaqub alayhi salam worked hard for another 7 years. And finally, he got to be married to Rachel. They lived together happily. Yaqub alayhi salam continued to work for his uncle for 20 long years. Laban's wealth had increased substantially because of the Prophet. But he was now missing his family very much, and he wanted to go back to them. One day, the Prophet asked his permission to return to his family. Laban agreed and promised him reward for working so hard. "Give me each speckled, spotted, and black lambs that were born this year," said Yaqub alayhi salam. Laban agreed, and the Prophet walked away happily. But Laban had grown greedy by now. He was not willing to part with the sheep he owned. He asked his sons to take away all the speckled, spotted, and black sheep from the flock. When Yaqub alayhi salam woke up in the morning, he realized that he had been tricked by his uncle. But Laban's trick didn't help him at all. When the sheep bred, most of them were born black or speckled. This was a miracle. When Laban saw this, he was angry. He had promised all the black lambs to Yaqub alayhi salam. One day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the Prophet to return to his country. The Prophet asked his wives and children to start packing as they were about to leave Haran. He took everything that belonged to him, including the spotted and black lambs. The Prophet did not tell Laban about his plans. He knew that his uncle would trick him into staying back, and knew that his uncle would never let him take his share of cattle. When Laban realized that Yaqub had taken his belongings and left Haran, he was very angry. So he took his people and followed Yaqub alayhi salam before they reached far. Laban and his team followed the tracks of the Prophet, and soon they caught up with him. "Why did you leave without my knowledge?" asked Laban. "If you had told me that you were leaving, we could have celebrated this occasion with a feast, and I could have bid farewell to my daughters as well." The Prophet somehow convinced his uncle, and they decided they will no longer interfere in the affairs of others. They sat on a hill called Galid, and they made a covenant there. It was decided that neither of them would enter the land of the other from that day. Then they cooked food and ate it together. Then each bade the other farewell as they departed, returning to their own country. The Prophet and his family walked, then started traveling towards his country. One day, at the break of dawn, the Prophet was sitting outside his tent. It was then that an angel appeared before him in the shape of a man. Then the angel started to wrestle with the Prophet. They fought neck and neck until the angel injured the Prophet's thigh, and the Prophet became lame. The sun had started rising up by now, and the angel asked him, "What is your name?" "Yaqub," replied the Prophet. "From this day you shall be called Israel," said the angel, and vanished into thin air. The Prophet could not believe his eyes, and he realized that the man was actually an angel. The Prophet and his family continued through their journey. When they reached the land known as Seir, he sent a messenger to Esau asking forgiveness. But the messenger returned with bad news. He informed the Prophet that Esau was riding toward him with some 400 men. The Prophet realized that his brother had still not forgiven him. He was afraid. So he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking his help. The Prophet then prepared a great present for his brother. He asked his servants to take 200 goats, 200 ewes, 30 camels, and many other animals along with them. He asked them to go ahead before him. "When you meet my brother," he said, "he will ask you who you are, and you should say they belong to your servant Yaqub, and the animals are the present for his master Esau." The Prophet waited for 2 more days, and then rode toward his country. Esau met Yaqub's slaves, and he was very impressed when they delivered the message. He was happy that his brother was giving him so much cattle. And then Esau saw his brother approaching. Yaqub alayhi salam prostrated to him as a sign of salutation. Esau was very happy when he saw this, and he had tears in his eyes. He hugged his brother and sought forgiveness for being angry with him for all these years. "Who are these people with you?" asked Esau when he saw the women and children. "They were given to me by our God," said the Prophet humbly. Leah, Rachel, the children, and all his slaves came and prostrated before Esau as a sign of respect. Esau refused to accept the gifts at first, but the Prophet insisted, and he had to accept them at last. All of them started traveling back to their country, and they were led by none other than Esau. On their way back, the Prophet camped near Jerusalem. It was here that the Prophet had poured the oil on a rock years ago. He then built a mosque as he had promised. Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam had 12 sons in total, and Yusuf was among them. He grew up into a handsome and devoted man. They migrated to Egypt and they lived there for 17 years. And after living and preaching about God for a long time, the Prophet died at the age of 147.